If we are unable to think straight, we become vulnerable to all sorts of dangerous situations. Toxic relationships poison us in more ways than one, and we have big warning signs on bottles and dangerous items. But nobody cautions us about how poisonous certain people can be to our joy, our inspiration, our peace of mind. And nobody warns us that certain people will manipulate your perception of what's possible for you. The environment we live in and the people we predominantly spend time with can influence us in numerous ways. Even if we possess an emotional and psychological resilience, a poisonous environment will eventually permeate and imbalance us, and slowly impair our ability to think clearly. If you're not discerning with repeated exposure to these type of people and environments, you will be instilled with a program in your mind where you learn to exist as a limited version of yourself. See, taking away your power to choose is the same as taking away your power to create. In crazy-making environments, we eventually can no longer tell when our perception has been tampered with. However, perception is not reality. So a huge part of your education needs to be about the most powerful yet subtle ways you are psychologically imprisoned and you're made to feel crazy and confused. The reason why I'm so passionate about amplifying the clarity on the type of psychological torture that people endure in controlling, narcissistic, psychopathic relationships is because it took me decades to reclaim my freedom. And when every type of freedom has been taken away from you, particularly psychological freedom, when you finally get that back, you really value it like a treasured jewel, and my heart truly goes out to anyone who's still enmeshed in all of this. Our psychological freedom and ability to think critically is infringed upon every moment of every day. But what I'm referring to in this video is about how that happens in our personal relationships with pathologically controlling people. A big consequence of being in relationship with a person who's a pathological narcissist is that eventually the exposure to their toxicity erodes our ability to think for ourselves. Our critical thinking ability just gets slowly more and more blurry. We struggle to discern the simplest of things. And this happens so gradually that most times we don't even notice, because it's often under the guise of caring for us, because apparently we seem confused about the facts of life, so they tell us how things are. They pull us into a state of shared paranoia about the world, other people, to the point where we are mistrustful of everything and we surrender to them making decisions for us. The associated CPTSD we so often experience as a result of these crazy-making environments disable us from thinking clearly. The anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts are not a matter of if, but when. And when we have this ongoing mental fatigue, it's easier for us to be infected with their self-defeating mind programs, where our perception of ourselves can become easily distorted. And this is why when we finally leave these relationships, we don't even know who we are. And this is a result of the programming and the psychological conditioning that we're not even aware that we received. And this doesn't refer to only one negatively influential person. It also refers to organizations and institutions. Make no mistake, and don't be naive. Even if you spend 5 minutes with a pathological narcissist, you'll start feeling very disoriented and confused. And when we're confused, we cannot protect ourselves. The most evil aspect of this slow erosion is that we don't recognize when the narcissist becomes godlike in our life. They've created a psychological dependency through their criticism of all our personal choices, where we are constantly being made to feel that we're wrong. Eventually, we just surrender our right to choose for ourselves, because of course they always know what's best for us. And we learn to depend on them making decisions for us, what to think, how to think. It just seems easier if we just shut up and don't cause unnecessary waves, because they're always going to win every conversation and they're always going to have the last word. So if you're questioning your sanity, or if you're harboring a sense of shame and you feel bad about why you feel so stupid, it becomes really important for you to take a closer look at your environment. And this video isn't about us versus them. It's to help you discern a crazy-making environment, to help you clarify about what's being done to you for you to feel this way. So how do we ever get to the state where we begin to question our sanity and we can't even think straight? Well, there are strategic ways in which they do this. Please don't ever believe that you are stupid or that there's something horribly wrong with you. No, this is exactly what they want you to believe. So you mistrust yourself and your ability to think for yourself. Remember that their aim is to create enmeshment and to keep you psychologically enslaved. I'm going to describe how that's done so you clearly understand. First of all, it might start rather innocently, perhaps with sarcasm, like, "Oh, you're so silly." And yes, sarcasm in the right context can be quite comical. Sarcasm can be a form of humor, but once again, it's the context and the intention that gives meaning. And I'll use sarcasm in this video to demonstrate how it's used to emphasize a point. Let's just get really clear at this point about what sarcasm is. In the context of narcissistic relationships, sarcasm is hostility disguised as humor, which is just a passive-aggressive way to hurt you, so then they can pretend that they didn't mean it that way. And so you're left feeling really bad about yourself, wondering whether you are overly sensitive. Then you'll notice insults disguised as compliments, where you're walking away left questioning, am I crazy? Was that a compliment or was that an insult? But then eventually, when they feel they have you completely under their control, they'll have the confidence to point blank attack you and tell you that you're incompetent and you're insane. And then let's not forget the episodes where history is completely recreated. And then there's stonewalling, gaslighting, and triangulating. And other common methods of manipulation include flattery, bribes in the form of money, promises of inheritance, or empty promises. These are all ways in which our judgment is slowly blurred. And never underestimate the following really powerful ways to psychologically and emotionally dysregulate you. And that is the use of shaming, shunning, guilt-tripping, ostracizing, and these are really extremely powerful ways to control humans. Just be aware of these techniques and notice how there's a gradual progression toward completely taking over your ability to think straight and to discern what's right and what's wrong and to know who's for you and who's against you. It's total crazy making, and we develop cognitive dissonance, which is a fancy term for when we struggle to comprehend that this person who is meant to love and care for us is also violent, aggressive, and abusive. Basically, it's when their words and actions don't match, and our brain tries to make sense of that. And it's when what you feel and what you see are two completely different things. So there's a dissonance, there's an incongruency. And other examples that you might relate to in your situation is if the narcissist in your life becomes the self-professed health expert whilst guzzling down 10 beers daily for the past 10 years. Or they'll be self-righteously preaching at you about scriptures in the Bible whilst never stepping inside a church since 1985. Or when they tell you that they love you, and that you deserve that slap in the face. The entire relationship is filled with inconsistencies. We have so many conflicting thoughts, it really feels like you're going mad. And whilst in that state, we can make irrational decisions. The trouble with cognitive dissonance is that we can't see it when we're suffering from it. Our ability to discern anything has been intentionally tampered with. We live in a chronic state of confusion, and this is utterly exhausting. Our mind swirls with questions like, should I stay or should I go? This is where months blur into years and years into decades, and before we know it, the narcissist has siphoned our life, our energy, finances, every ounce of inspiration, our health, slowly and covertly. Remember that you have a right to ask about anything that confuses you, and for it to be explained to you in a rational way that you understand. And if a person, particularly if you're in an intimate relationship with them, seems to be incapable or unwilling to clarify things for you, then you're not in a relationship. You're in a power struggle where they are intentionally withholding information from you to keep you under their control. Notice in these relationships how we never get closure. Instead, we are frequently intimidated and bullied into silence, to the point where we eventually lose our voice and our confidence. I think most people would agree that if someone you love courageously asks you to help them understand something, that this is not an opportunity to showcase your psychological superiority, but it is a time to humbly and patiently answer their question in a way that respects their intelligence and preserves their sense of self-worth. Eventually, what happens to us psychologically in these type of relationships is that we end up in a chronic state of confusion that completely immobilizes us from taking action, mistrusting our reality, mistrusting our inner guidance, our moral compass. So we inadvertently turn to them as a source of reference about everything in life. They become our sun that our life orbits around, despite their life being in total disarray. If we don't recognize how we gave our power away, we will still be looking for another savior, another authority figure, a parental role, and somebody else to make decisions for us. And this will make us susceptible to always attracting these type of dysfunctional dynamics. When we escape the clutches of their control, we may still have a longing for their approval or their permission. So you need to be conscious of when or if this is still happening for you. So getting away physically is nowhere near as challenging as letting them go emotionally. You need to discard your need for them, their approval or validation. And this might be a really unfamiliar fact, but you are the only authority on your life. Not your therapist, not me, not your grandma, not some fancy sounding guru. These are all just secondary sources that can offer you guidance. But at the end of the day, you need to learn to make decisions for yourself about your life that feel right for you. And this is the aspect that narcissistic relationships really mess up within us. We lose touch with our own inner authority. Critical thinking ability means that we're able to analyze and assess information and form our own judgments and have our own opinions. It's where we evaluate knowledge and clarify concepts. Critical thinking also means that we're able to think clearly and rationally about what to do and what to believe. And these are important goals on our healing journey. Critical thinking is self-directed. We don't have to attack someone when they express something we may not agree with. Let's remember that a truly wise person listens because they've developed the discipline to hear another person. whereas a foolish person reacts defensively and attacks another person for expressing a different opinion. And words can be easily misinterpreted. So our goal should be to feel for whatever truth resonates for us, irrespective of what anybody else thinks, utilizing both our heart and our mind. There is another inner aspect that goes on for us that I want you to be aware of, and that is that we often learn to be over-responsible for the stupidity of others. So we often feel guilty for even thinking bad thoughts about the narcissistic abuser because the self-defeating program that's been instilled in us only allows us to remember the good times. Yeah, sure, there may have been good times, but let's not forget that even those good times were clouded with palpable tension and severe emotional discomfort that was screaming out to us, something is horribly wrong here. So just be aware if you notice feeling an avalanche of guilt about the awful stuff that actually happened to you, let's just put that toxic guilt in its rightful place. And remember that this is also associated with the energetic dumping. And I'll talk further about what happens on an energetic level in a future video, because this energetic and spiritual aspect is essential for you to be aware of as well. It's not just the emotional, the physical, the psychological aspects. The energetic and spiritual are the most profound aspects that you need to get very familiar with. You really need to understand what's happening on the energetic and very subtle levels, so you're able to set yourself free from this. And this topic warrants an entire video series, and it's definitely on my to-do list. Please also be aware that for a certain amount of time, this program also functions to protect the narcissist. And if we are not aware, we'll find ourselves justifying their abuse, minimizing the psychological torture we endured. Another impact of cognitive dissonance is that when we have finally left this vortex that sucked the life out of us, we still cannot get clarity because the program kicks in and we spend endless nights wondering if we made the right decision. Maybe they're not such a bad person. Perhaps they were right, that we were the ones who were unloving or impatient, or we didn't care enough. So whenever we slip back into that cognitive dissonant state, it's like an energetic attachment that's activated. So whenever you are overcome with pity for them, or when we're not sure if we made the right decision about leaving, or when we question whether the abuse happened at all, only those who have experienced this can truly appreciate the liberating power of clarity. Because if we don't get really clear and transparent about the details of what happened, the peace of mind that we long for will always be clouded with doubt. I'm just sharing these really intricate details of the narcissist's crazy-making process to validate your reality, your experience. You are not alone, and that you and I are not insane. These are strategic methods used by these emotional predators who target people who aren't aware of their devious ploys. So I hope my very clear description of the way we are made to feel insane can bring you some comfort and validation. In the next video, I really want to share with you one of the most clarifying exercises that really helped me put an end to all of this once and for all.